Good afternoon. Welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Act Subcommittee. Apologies, we've started a couple of minutes late this afternoon. My name's Amanda Holyoke. I'm the Democratic Services Officer for the meeting. First of all, this is to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting if they use the link on the agenda to do so. At the start of the meeting, I will ask members of the committee, officers and those making representations to introduce themselves. Everyone that speaks during the meeting is asked to introduce themselves, please, each time they speak, so it's clear to those listening who is speaking. Please use the microphone to do this, so you'll be invited to come to the table to use that microphone there. To turn it on, you press the right hand button, and to turn it off after you finish speaking, that is also the right hand button. So first of all, could I ask please the members, the councillors, to introduce themselves?
Yeah, Peter Broomall, Wem Division.
Nigel Lumby, I'm councillor for Albrighton.
Royal Croft, councillor for Market Drayton East and Rural.
Thank you. And if I could ask the officers in the room to introduce themselves to me, please.
My name is Graham White. I'm solicitor for the council, providing legal advice to the committee today.
Ross O'Neill, licensing officer.
Thank you. And if we could have the applicants please introduce themselves.
Yes, indeed. Good afternoon. My name is John Payne. I'm a lawyer. I'm representing the applicant.
My name is Luke Fitzmaurice for LFX Events, representing the applicant. I'm the event production manager for the events.
Thank you. And then the other persons we are expecting to make representations today, if I could read out your name, if you could just indicate that you're here, please. Mr. Broadley. Thank you. Mr. Burke. Yep. John and Margaret Cartwright. Thank you. Jennifer Gill. Stuart Waite. And Sarah Burke.
Not participating in discussion. I'm here as a member of the public.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. We can now get on with the election of the chairman for the meeting. Is there a nomination, please, for the chair?
Yes, I'll nominate Councillor Nigel Lumby as chair. I'll second that.
Okay, so Councillor Lumby, please, would you take the chair? Thank you.
Thank you. The committee has read and considered the representations and evidence submitted by all parties in relation to the application. Therefore, presentations should be succinct and kept to a brief summary of key points. There is no need to read out written representations or reiterate the details of written representations at great length. The chair will intervene if it is felt that presentations are becoming overly long, are going off track, or do not relate to the application being considered. The procedure for the hearing has been sent to you prior to the hearing. In general, we will aim to keep to this order of business to ensure the timely and fair conduct of the hearing for all parties. If it is felt necessary during the course of the hearing, the committee may make the decision to deviate from that procedure. This is at the committee's discretion. There are opportunities throughout the hearing for each party to ask questions of others following their presentations. Please ensure that you use this opportunity to ask questions only and not to make any further points or statements. It is for the chair to decide if questions are appropriate and relate to the matter in hand. Any behaviour considered to be disruptive by the chair may lead to parties being muted or asked to leave the hearing. Does anybody have any questions regarding the hearing process or how the hearing will be conducted? No. So my first question then to Mr. O'Neill, the licensing officer, have there been any representations made that have been withdrawn?
Yes, Chair, one's been withdrawn this morning, Councillor Bobbington.
So this is a question to all the parties here. Does anybody wish to withdraw their representation? Does any party have any evidence not already submitted which they would like to put forward for consideration? Please be aware that this can only be done with the agreement of all the parties present and the subcommittee, and may necessitate the hearing being adjourned so it can be properly considered by all parties and the subcommittee.
Mr. Chairman, John
Can you come forward to the mic, please? Thank you.
John Cartwright, Ludlow Civic Society. I don't wish to table new evidence, but I do wish to make reference to the Noise Council's Code of Practice on Environmental Noise Control at Concerts. It's a standard document, the standard guide to noise control at concerts used by virtually all local authorities and also used by Shrewsbury Town Council. So with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make reference to that in my brief submission.
Brad?
Well, making representations is fine. If you would want to submit the document itself, then we need to get the agreement of all the parties. But if you want to refer to parts of it, then that should be fine.
I imagine, Mr. Chairman, the council already has the document. It's just that I will be referring to it, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So we move on to item 2, which is disposable pecuniary question. Sorry.
Could I make reference? Thank you. Could I make reference to the Shropshire Plan 2022 to 25, please, which I'm sure the Shropshire Council will know all about.
Principal advice.
You can certainly make reference to it within your representation, but bearing in mind you've already submitted your evidence as such, so your representation should be based on a summary of what you've already said. If you're now introducing new material, we may consider that you're going off.
I quite understand my representation covers what I'm
Have to say. There you go then.
Thank you.
Should work. Whatever. Back to item 2 then, disclosable pecuniary interests. Members are reminded to disclose any registrable or non-registrable interest in any matters to be discussed. If following the declaration of an interest, any party feels that a member's decision making may be prejudiced, they should make it known. The hearing may then need to be adjourned so the committee can be reappointed.
I
I have
none to declare.
Okay then, thank you. Can the licensing officer now introduce themselves and present their report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Like previously stated, I'm Public Protection Officer working in the licensing team and responsible for today's report. So I'll keep it brief as the applicant is here, so we'll speak more detail. But you're here today to consider a new premises licence application which has been applied for by Future Sound Events Limited for Ludlow Castle. And as of the report, you'll find Appendix A and B are a map and photographs to help you set the scene. The castle does currently have a premises licence that allows unlimited events for up to 4,999 in attendance at any one time. This application was submitted separately to that licence, and this is to allow 7,000 present at any given one time. Originally for 15 events during the period of the 1st of May to 30th of September annually. Appendix C and D of the report. So you've got the application is C and the plan submitted is Appendix D. So during the consultation period, trading standards, environmental protection, the licensing authority and the police all submitted representations. The applicant has agreed all conditions as set out in paragraph 8 of my report. And you'll also find in the addendum Appendix H is a document that has all the conditions on the original application and the authorities set out in one consolidated report together for you. There are no representations outstanding of any authorities. There, however, were 19 representations received off other persons against this application. They have all been given the benefit of the doubt as per 182 guidance to allow them to amplify their concerns today. And you'll find Appendix E is a map showing the location in relation to the castle. And then you've got Appendix F 1 to 19 are the representations in full for you to consider. As previously stated, Councillor Boddington has withdrawn his representations, and there was also supporting information submitted yesterday to the licensing authority of Mr. Burke. This has been accepted in accordance to Section 18 of the hearing regulations. However, I have today been informed that there is a typing error in that report. So within Appendix I, which again is the addendum, you will find that on paragraph 4, there is a percentage 625 percentage that should read 280. So that's Appendix I, paragraph 4 of the supporting information from Mr. Burke, 625 should read 280. Okay, so we also received 4 representations in support of this application. They are Appendix G, and they are numbered 1 to 4 for you to look over as well. So to clarify, it's a new premises licence application to run alongside Ludlow Castle's current licence. It was applied for 15 events, but as per the report, you'll find that an agreement with Environmental Protection has reduced it to 8, and there are outstanding reps, hence why we are here today. And that comes to the legal side of it. So you're here today to consider and determine the application. To do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to promote the 4 licensing objectives, any representations, the 182 guidance of the Licensing Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's licensing policy, which is 2009 to 2024. You then may grant the application in full or in part, subject to such conditions deemed necessary and appropriate to the 4 licensing objectives, or refused if deemed appropriate, again in relation to the 4 licensing objectives. And then your decision, it must be justified and it must provide supporting evidence after to all involved parties here today and anyone that couldn't attend, and the decision can be appealed within 21 days of all parties receiving the decision notice. That's it for me for now, Chair.
Thank you. So you will now be given an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of the licence officer. The order I will take the questions in is the applicant, other persons, and then finally the committee. So first I'll ask the applicant, so that whether it's Mr. Payne or Mr. Morris.
Chairman, I think it's going to be me for most of this, so I will deal with that. I'm grateful to the officer for his report. It's very much appreciated. I have no questions for him.
Okay, thank you. So if I can just have an indication from the speakers of yourselves, who wants to make a representation or ask questions? So, yeah, questions, sorry, no questions. That's Mr. Burke, is it correct? Yeah. You want to come forward to the microphone then, ask a question or questions? Thank you.
Is that an action to me, Chairman?
Yes.
I don't think that's clear. Is that, you want to ask me a question?
Yes, please. Yeah. I have a number of questions, Mr. Chairman, if that's acceptable. Do I need to press any buttons here?
The right hand.
No.
So it's on the front.
Oh, on the front there. Yeah. Okay, is that? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks very much for the reports and also your excellent communications here to the board. It's been very helpful. I'd like to ask if it's normal to have licenses running concurrently for the same site. So we have license running that's taken out by Paris Estates, and under this application we would have one for Future Sand. Is it normal to have 2 licenses running concurrently?
The word normal doesn't really come under the Licence Act, but it can happen, hence why the application's here. So as long as the landowner's permission has been granted, then obviously that licence for Ludlow Castle would cease on those days that this licence would be granted, as obviously this licence would take precedence over that licence.
Take precedence over.
Yes, we wouldn't have 2 simultaneously. So it's.
Oh, I see. You have 2 lots
yes.
of express at the same time of day, so on 2 different licenses. Okay, thank you. And is it the case that the
current licence, the House Estates licence, under that they have considerable capacity to organise future events without further consultation with the licensing body.
Yes, it's a historic license. So when the license was applied for, the same process would have gone through with this prior to my time with Shropshire Council, and those conditions on the license, which let's say are historic, would have been what was agreed.
So licensing wouldn't know, for example, if House Estates decided they wanted to hold another 8 events, notwithstanding the licence for future sound having been granted.
The license allows them to have the events. The conditions are what is the legal requirements. If they choose to have events and we get input on it, obviously there is a review process where authorities or other persons can gain evidence and call a review on a premises licence.
Sorry, could you say that again for me? I didn't quite gather the.
So the licence that's in stands at the minutes, which there was events last year run on it.
Yeah.
If there were concerns by the public, they have the ability to call a review. So if they've got evidence to call a review, that review period, which same process as today, then obviously conditions could be added to the licence, or the licence, if the committee decide on the day, could be taken away from them.
Thank you, that's very helpful. Are you aware if there's been any consideration of the aggregate numbers implied by 7,000 a day people for 8 days in terms of how they relate to the size of the town, previous attendance, footfall, so on? Is that part of the process of consideration as far as you're aware, for example, from the Environmental Protection Officer?
Process has got to be under the 4 licence objectives. So everything's got to be under crime and disorder, public safety, public nuisance, or protection of children from harm. So if one of those professional officers deems it necessary or believes it should be in that group, then obviously they can put representations against it. Anything in relation to the actual premises where the actual licence is, so i.e. the plan of the premises with a red lighting, that obviously then comes to the fire brigade, fire risk assessments, who would assess. One of the things we look at when we do events, whether they've got a licence with conditions on it or whether or not they've got a historic licence to allow it, is we do have a safety advisory group, and we advise people to tell us about events, particularly with over 500 people involved, so they can get professional help and advice. Some of the authorities, not all of them are involved with this. For example, the Highways Agency aren't involved in this process, but through the safety advisory group, which would encourage people to go and utilise, the highways do sit on that table, as do the ambulance service.
So there's nothing the Highways group could contribute to this process in terms of approving the licence?
They could if they wanted to under the 4 licence objectives, but they don't get given the paperwork. So you've seen the site notice on the newspaper article. It's the same process, whether that's they'd be classed as other persons, and whether they want to be considered as an individual, a body, or a business, they could put representations in.
Is it your understanding from the application that the noise generated under this licence would begin at 9 o'clock in the morning? Because that's when they start sound checks and testing.
The sound checks obviously wouldn't be a licensable activity. But obviously, if they are sound testing, they still could create a public nuisance, which is obviously something the Environmental Protection Officer in his professional field will be looking at.
So if we go from 9 o'clock to the 10:30 that is currently under consideration, 10:30 finish in the evening, that's 13.5 hours of the potential to make noise during the day of the event. So from 9 o'clock in the morning to 10:30. So that's 13.5 hours.
Potentially, if that's what they've applied for, I'd have to get the application up, but obviously that's something that the applicant can.
So I realise that's slightly
with you.
Yeah.
And obviously the Environmental Protection Officer has, as a professional, considered that. He's the expert in that field, not myself, in relation to noise.
So this explains some of what you said. Then I think that you'll clarify this again for me. About, for example, the highways and so on, police and so on. This underpins why there is nothing in the responses from the responsible authorities that deal with events outside the castle grounds. So, for example, traffic, number of people, road closures, dangers to pedestrians, access for and parking of large vehicles. that falls without any of the considerations under the licence hearing, does it?
It's not falls back. If you can justify under the 4 objectives that it's relevant, then obviously the committee can listen and take it into consideration. When I take an application, I can only forward it to the authorities under the Licensing Act, and the highways aren't one of those authorities. However, if they see outside notice or they get wind of it or a member of the public lets them know, then potentially they might put representations forward. What the licensing authority do, as one of our officers you'll see in the report, she does consider when there's events, the risk factor involved, and the conditions then she proposes are to make sure that the safety advisory group are considered, depending on what wording's been agreed with the applicant. But the idea is that they sit around the table with multiple authorities who are the professionals in their field, and they get that advice.
But that's after the event. So the event would be, if the licence was agreed, part of that condition would be that the licensees consulted with the SAG. Is that correct?
Yes, but not necessarily. If the licensing officer's representation was rejected, then she could be sat at the table today. But it hasn't, it's been agreed, and those conditions have been put forward. So it's the same as all the authorities. She's put them forward, and she's looked out of the, she's looked at the realms of other authorities, how they can help. At the end of the day, it's looking at other aspects. But yes, you've got the 4 licensed objectives. Are the 4 licensed objectives, compared to what you've mentioned, are they relevant? It's a good question. That's what the committee have then got to consider, and then potentially at the end of the day, there's a more a court, that's a judge at thought.
Okay, thank you. Skip that. Do we know what the current licence noise limits are? And I ask that because under this proposal, the limits are set at 70 or 75 decibels according to the circumstances. And do we know if those are unchanged from the events that have been undertaken under the current licence, or is this a change? Are we talking more noise, less noise?
I couldn't answer that. You'd have to ask that to the applicants from their experience last year to see if they've got any of those figures for you, but I wouldn't be able to answer that, sorry.
Would it, yeah. Again, this might be a question for an applicant rather than for you, but the application and the report refers to a headline act without defining what a headline act is. Do we know what a headline act is?
Again, it wouldn't come under, the 4 licensed objectives, but I would assume that a headline act, again, that's clarified with them, but that's probably someone who's more popular.
But it's 4 because we're told that a headline act may make noise up to 75 decibels, as distinct from, presumably, any other act. So it's material to know, perhaps this is not for you, but it's material to know what a headline act is and how long they will have occupied stage and so on. It's not an insignificant.
Yeah, no, again, it's not something I can answer. And that's what the applicants are advertising. And also, there is a noise discrepancy between the headline and the others. Again, it's something I would suggest you put forward to them.
Thank you. Did I miss that there was no map of the location of people submitting supporting statements? There was one of those submitting opposing statements. Was there a map of?
No, you didn't miss it. We don't do one. If people who put supporting evidence in, we wouldn't be here today. So we put representations in map for representations against supporting information. Let's say if the 19 representations were only support, this meeting wouldn't be taking place, the licence would have been granted.
Yeah, so the map we saw marked various addresses in an imprecise way, but nonetheless marked various addresses. But there would not be a similar map for supporting statements.
Not that I do. Obviously, if you've got it, like say, if you feel like it should be done, then I'm more than take that on board. And if you believe the committee has been
pressure on.
No, it's fine.
There is
but
a
it
point
doesn't.
of question.
The support, like I said, the supporting representations are supporting the application. If we get supporting representations, it's highly likely that I ring them and say, you put representations in, do you want to go to a hearing to support? And they will say no, and the licence is granted.
So last question, thank you for your patience. The last question is then, as a result of that, we can see that objectors come from an area quite close to the castle, but we have no idea of where the supporting of the location of the supporters of the licence are. Is that Correct. So we
Yeah,
don't know
that's-
that
yeah,
they're
that's-
local, miles away,
That's-
businesses, personal.
Yeah, that's the point. Obviously, the all disclosures given to the applicants, they're aware of it. Again, if you believe it's relevant and the subcommittee think it's relevant, when I can bring them up and I can give street names or postcodes or areas if you
I
believe
don't know
it.
whether it will be relevant. It depends how things progress. Thank you.
It's
Very, yeah.
It is something I can get up. Like I say, I've got their addresses, so if needs be. But like I say, the reason we don't do it is because, like I say, supporting representations are completely the opposite to representations against.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much indeed. That's been very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berg. You want to take your seat?
Press the button again.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other people that are going to make a representation? So that's
Two very quick questions. I'll be very brief.
right.
John Cartwright, Civic Society again. Mr. O'Neill, I noticed that for this summer there are 4 events planned for concerts in the castle, July the 25th to July the 28th, I think. Am I right in thinking those events are authorised under the old licence?
Any advertisement the castle are doing, obviously it's nothing to do with us. If they have the event at this moment in time, this licence hasn't been granted. So if those events went ahead, then yes, they would have to be under that licence, unless they applied for a separate another licence. So until the events come on that day, it depends what licence is in place.
Okay, but I think the events are advertised. So what I want to clarify is whatever happens here today, even if the application is rejected, those concerts can still go ahead and they're not jeopardised.
Potentially, yes, up to 5,000, but again, that would be the discussions privately between the applicants and the applicant and the landowner, decide whether or not it's feasible for them to do that. But as it stands today, the Ludlow Castle does have a licence, and those advertised events could go forward with up to 5,000 at the location.
Okay. The next question is one of procedure, which is that in the papers that you sent out in advance, under 8.3, environmental protection stated and agreed. I do have some questions about what environmental protection stated. Is this the right moment, Mr. Chairman, or does environmental protection get represented later?
Environmental protection aren't here. So
I do have a very important question about one of their statements. Could you advise me?
you're asking questions of the licensing officer.
Yeah.
So you can ask him and he'll either say, I don't know. And then we can see what the question is and we can ask the solicitor whether it's relevant.
Okay, so I ask the question now then. Okay. I don't know if you can turn to 8.3, Mr. O'Neill, the last
Of my report, yeah.
of your report.
Yeah.
The maximum music noise level.
Bottom sentence.
Yeah, the maximum music noise level when measured 1 metre from the facade of the noise sensitive properties. Yes, then.
Yes, I've got that.
I just wonder where those figures came from.
I can tell you, unfortunately, all I have is those 2 paragraphs off that officer and then the bullet points and then that further paragraph.
Okay. Am I right in thinking that they probably have come from the noise control advice on noise control at concerts, which is the standard document I referred to earlier?
I couldn't assume, I couldn't say that's something I'd have to throw back to the chair and the solicitor in the room.
Okay, can I refer, with your permission, Mr. Chairman, to that document, which is to clarify whether or not that statement did come from policy advice document?
Chairman, Environmental Health made representations and any discussion with the applicant, conditions were agreed which satisfied Environmental Health, so they withdrew their objections, but they're satisfied with the condition as it stands in that way. I don't know where the figure came from, but as they've withdrew their objections, they're not here as a party to speak and to answer questions at the hearing, so we won't be able to answer the question, I'm afraid.
That's a pity. I'd like to raise it again later, though, to the applicants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Any other people making a representation that want to ask any question? Good, thank you. And we come round to the the applicant presenting the case then. So can the applicants introduce themselves again and present their application, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name, as I say, is John Payne. I'm a lawyer that is representing the applicant in this matter. And perhaps I should start at first principles, which have been admirably outlined by your licensing officer, that there is already a license in place for this premises. You hopefully are familiar with that license. It grants the conduct of licensable activities principally between the hours of 10 a.m. in the morning to midnight, with the exception of performance of dance, which is until 23:30, exhibition of films to 23:30, and plays to 23:30 as well. So the other activities are through to midnight. You'll know that that license is granted essentially to the castle itself, and my clients are not the castle itself. They are the promoters that organise the events at the castle, indeed the ones that took place last year. Now, in applying for a licence, quite clearly what has been done is an attempt has been made to replicate what was on the licence, or what is the licence at the moment, and add to that by putting in a significant swathe of conditions to assist everybody involved in the concert, whether they are at the concert, whether they are the landowner, or indeed whether they are people living near the venue. And you will see that there is a significant schedule of conditions that have been proposed. Those go way beyond the conditions that appear on the licence as it appears now. Indeed, the licence, and perhaps to preempt the question, the licence as it appears now does not have a specific noise limit set upon it. What there is, however, and what happened last year, was that there was engagement with the Safety Advisory Group and with environmental health, and similar levels to those proposed in the application this year were agreed to be adhered to for those events. So the applicants voluntarily imposed a limit upon themselves. Now, I say that was voluntary, indeed it was. Had they not done so, of course, environmental health had the power to come along, serve abatement notice if they thought there was going to be a nuisance, and take action if those levels were exceeded and they felt a nuisance had occurred. But that's not happened. What did happen last year is that there were a small number of complaints that were made directly to the premises, and those were acted upon by the premises. There was one complaint on the 20th of the 7th, which was due to the event that was taking place, and that happened at 25 minutes past 10. And the caller, I should say, was responded to, but there was no answer, so nothing could be done in terms of speaking to that person. There were complaints on the 21st as well, and again, evaluations were carried out, and it was found that the sound levels were compliant with those levels that were agreed with environmental health, who I understand were on the site as it happened, in any case, checking things, and quite clearly they were happy with those levels in terms of where they were. The other complaint that was received was on the 22nd, before the event opened, while pre-tests were being carried out, so it wasn't anything relevant to the licence. So what has happened in the past is that the promoter involved in this event has engaged with environmental health, has engaged with the Safety Advisory Group, and has self-imposed restrictions and made sure that those restrictions have been complied with. Now, in terms of going forward, it's probably helpful for me to pass over to Lucas Morris to explain a little bit about what is planned at the castle, and just really to set it in context, because a licence application by itself, as I'm sure you appreciate, can cover a multitude of licensable activities, a multitude of genres, a multitude of ways of performing. So if I can pass over, it would be helpful just to hear a few words about perhaps the engagement, a little bit about what the plan is for the future as well.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. So, Mr. Morris.
Yeah, Luke Fitzmaurice from the applicant. I'm the person responsible for planning and management and delivery of the events that take place. So thank you, Chair, thank you, Committee. In terms of just to give you some background to the proposed activity to take place under the licence. The applicant Future Sound Events is a live music event promoter, engaging only in the promotion of live music concerts and live music festivals. Doesn't get involved in dance music events or the similar events of that nature. So it's predominantly and only interested in promoting concerts with live performers. And it does so successfully from its base in Leeds in Yorkshire, across the region and across the UK. Why Ludlow? Well, the owner of the company, who is in the room today, is a Ludlow resident, born and raised in Ludlow. His mother lives on Mill Street, just around the corner from the castle, and has long seen the Ludlow Castle as a great location for events of this nature, and really wanted to bring something back to the town in which he grew up. And indeed, that's what we achieved in 2023, with a very successful run of concerts that were incredibly well attended, and incredibly well attended by the local residents. One of the key features of these events is that they include a pre-sale to the local community using postcode data. So purchasers get with postcodes from a 14-mile radius of Ludlow get an early opportunity to purchase the tickets, and indeed up to 70% of the tickets for the concerts last year were sold within that radius. So it is very much about bringing something back and putting something back into the community in Ludlow, and doing something great for the town of Ludlow. That probably is where the summary of it is. But I would just circle back to what I said at the beginning. This is a live music focused business who's interested in bringing live music events of great cultural significance and relevance to the town and area of Ludlow, to the town, and really kind of add some value to the community and also to the commerce within the town. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask the licensing officer if he wants to make.
I'm sorry, so I hadn't quite finished. I was going to come back and just complete. I'm sorry to steal your thunder, if that's all right. I've just got a few more things I need to add. Clearly, as you've heard, events have taken place, and the events have been significantly well received, I think it's fair to say, by a number of people within the town. If one looks at the dreaded social media, one can see all sorts of comments. I've noted one comment which was from Mr. Elson, who says that last year's event was, in my opinion, and every other person I've spoken to, a great success and generated a lot of desperately needed tourism and income for Ludlow. Well, that's quite an interesting statement in terms of the benefits that the licensable activity has brought to Ludlow. And I think it probably does tie up with some of the publicity that has been seen in the last, indeed, just the last few months. For example, one can see that Visit Shropshire published in December a statement that tourism benefited the economy by £767.23 million. That is a big boost to the economy by putting on such events. I'm not suggesting that this concert in itself contributed £767 million, but what is quite interesting is in the press release that accompanied that announcement, there is a picture of a venue immediately under that title. It will be of no surprise to you that the picture of the venue is Ludlow Castle. Now, Ludlow Castle, of course, does other things as well, but this licence will enable it to continue to do the very good work that it's done. It will help it to contribute to the economy. It will help
those that are in the town that want to have those sorts of events somewhere to go. And you've heard about the leaflet drop, the publicity within the 14-mile radius, and indeed the number of ticket sales within that radius and not far beyond it is significant. What this licence will do is benefit the community in its entirety, one might say, certainly in terms of business and the viability of the town. Not by itself, you appreciate, it is something that has to be done in partnership with the town council. And that is why there has been engagement with the town council in the past. That's why there were meetings prior to the previous events. And that's why the promoters would like to continue that engagement into the future. It is a partnership approach to ensure that these events work well. And that is the point of the application from beginning to end. It's putting in place a licence that is suitable for these events so that everybody knows where they stand, so that everybody can benefit from the protection that the conditions, for example, provide for. And those conditions, as you've heard, have been negotiated, discussed and pre-consulted with those responsible authorities who have the power to make representations. And that's where we are now. So I can say little more to commend the application to you. I'll address you on points of policy in my summing up later. But I think in terms of what is planned for the council, what is planned for the licence, you have in a nutshell. Of course, we're more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. O'Neill?
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. So if we go in the same order then, Mr. Burke, have you got?
Yes, I have quite a number of questions, so you may prefer to change the order, Mr. Chairman, give other people a chance.
Okay, who wants to go first? Mr. Cartwright?
John Cartwright, Ludlow Civic Society. A couple of questions to the applicants. Firstly, you mentioned the benefits to the local community, and you mentioned the town council. I wonder why you think, if the benefits are so great as you state, that the town council has made an objection to the application, not objecting to 15 events, objecting to 8 events. In other words, which is to reject this application outright. If it's such a boon to the town, why do you think the council oppose it?
Well, Chair,
Can I just can you turn your mic off, please? Sorry. Mr. Cartwright, can I just remind you that you're asking questions? That sounded very much like a statement to me. So moving forward, for everybody who's going to be asking questions, not statements, really.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. It's a very quick question, Chairman, and it's to establish the balance between costs and benefits. So there is a genuine question. There's not simply a parliamentary style question to follow.
Okay.
Would you like an answer for that, or shall
okay.
I keep going?
Mr. Bain.
Well, Chairman, I was about to say that obviously I can't comment on the town council and the approach that it takes and why it's written what it has. All I can say is that there has been consultation with it. There have been agreements signed, not signed, but there have been agreements with the town council about the staging of events. Clearly, I have no idea about the rationale and the psyche of the town council. I can't. And likewise, if there are questions about others, as I suspect there might be, about why environmental health has suggested certain questions or certain criteria, I can't answer those again.
Okay, finally, just very quick, I mentioned the economic benefits to the community, but obviously there's also distress and anxiety caused within the community, which is why we're here today. And I wonder how you can balance the two, whether you think always financial benefits outweigh distress and disturbance to people's lives.
Well, Chairman, this is a very straightforward answer I will give you. It's not, of course, for me to weigh the benefits and the disbenefits. Regrettably, that is the job of the licensing committee. I say regrettably, not having some sympathy with you in having that job to do. But clearly, in terms of assessing, for example, the question of nuisance, which I know is high on the lips of everyone, there is a balancing act to be performed. The balancing act recognises that One does not expect to hear absolute silence from events, but on the same token, one doesn't expect to be unreasonably disturbed. And I say those in the context of some of the case law that is on public nuisance. One has to be a bit careful. There is a balancing act between the two. Clearly, that is set out within the licensing policy that you have. It's also set out within the Secretary of State's guidance. I'm glad I'm not the one that has to make that decision, but there is a balance. And what we say is that we have looked at that balance and we have volunteered and agreed with the responsible authorities a significant number of conditions which tip that balance in favour of the grant of the licence. Those conditions that are put in place protect the reasonable expectations that there should be about protecting the local community. And let me be plain on this. The council and the promoter has no interest in deliberately causing any nuisance or disturbance to people who are living nearby. If they are disturbed, they need to call, as people have done last year, to make sure that action can promptly be taken. It would, of course, be unreasonable to expect somebody from the event to sit in everybody's front living room to see whether the level is too high or not. But it is reasonable to expect a call to be made if there is a problem. And if there is a problem, then, of course, the licence holder will make arrangements to modify that sound as necessary, to assess that sound. You will have heard from me already that environmental health have been on site during events, and their assessment of the balance is that this is something that is satisfactory.
Okay, one last question to Mr. Morris, the applicant. Mr. Morris, in the section in your application on prevention of public nuisance, you say noise from live music events shall not exceed levels established by best practiced industry norms and evidence arising from current research, with notice given to relevant legislation and guidance. Could I just confirm that you have taken guidance from the Noise Council's documents, Code of Practice on Environmental Noise Control at Concerts, 1995. I believe in the industry it's called the POP Code.
Well, Chairman, I'm representing, so I'll answer that one. I, at this point, probably should reveal a hand that I have, in that, as well as being a lawyer, I actually started my career as, I wish I had said this, but an environmental health officer. And at that stage, I was aware of the POP Code and was indeed aware of the draft nature of that POP Code. And indeed, I am aware that that POP Code has been adopted in the loosest sense of fashion without any consultation of the industry. So in terms of it being a best practice guide, it is at best a rough and ready guide, and therefore is something that has to be perhaps given regards to, but does not need to be followed slavishly. Indeed, if it had to be followed slavishly, it would have been incorporated in within legislation. It hasn't. Now, in terms of what the code says, clearly that is some advice that can be considered. And I rather suspect if those in environmental health did the same job that I would have done had I been assessing this as an environmental health officer, they would have looked at the POP Code, they would have looked at the locality, they would have looked at other issues. Now, I think that having a code is great, but it needs to be a bit more comprehensive than the POP Code actually is. And I'm sure that the officers, having looked at that and looked at things in the round, will have said these limits that are set out in the consolidated terms at 36 are the ones that are reasonable. Now, beyond that, we don't know what environmental health have done, as I've already indicated, but one can just imagine that they will have had regard to that. Certainly if they are as competent as I think they are, they will have done that, and they would have looked at other reference sources as well.
Okay. Is it not the case that the code of practice, as you mentioned, has been widely adopted by numerous councils around?
Mr. Cartwright, I'm going to stop you there because I think Mr. Payne has answered better than we expected because of the fact of his previous job. We have not got environmental health here today, so you're asking questions that we can't answer. So, and as Mr. Payne pointed out, is environmental health would have considered everything they needed to and made their recommendation to the licensing officer and then to this subcommittee. So you're actually going on about something that we can't answer.
Okay, I'll withdraw that. I'll raise it again.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Jennifer Gill, resident of Dinham. Can I ask the applicant, and actually I would like to also ask the councillors about the Shropshire Plan 2022 to 25. I'm wondering if the applicant has actually read it.
Well, Chair, I'm assuming that what's being referred to is the local plan, which is a planning document rather than a licensing document. I don't know is the simple answer. Obviously, in preparing the application, regard will have been had to the section 182 guidance produced by the Secretary of State. Regard will have been had to the Council's statements of licensing policy, and regard will have been had to the other documents produced by the local authority. Those are the substantially pertinent ones that have to be considered in making a licence application.
Could I raise...
Mrs. Gill, you said that you wanted to ask the councillors as well. I'm just about to say that you can't.
I can't. Okay. I'll ask the applicant, but you may stop me. It's regarding the Shropshire Plan 2022 to 25, and it's about the environment. There are 4 points here. The council, Shropshire Council, have reportedly they are delivering the council's action plan, promoting the means to reduce carbon footprint, including the promotion of cleaner air. Based on last time with the concerts, we had in Ludlow congested parking, restricted access of residents to their homes, great increase in traffic in Ludlow, impact of road closures. Dinham Road is not wide enough for 2 vehicles to go past each other. How do you square that point with the Shropshire plan, please?
I just reiterate the point that I have already made, is that the Shropshire Power Plan, valuable as it is a matter for you to apply in your determination. It's not something that is required, and it's not in the guidance that has to be given consideration to during the application process. Clearly, what has to be considered is the 4 licensing objectives. The one licensing objective I think that is pertinent to that, which does have some relevance, is prevention of public nuisance. And quite clearly, regard has been given to that, which is why we have the noise limits.
I'm very pleased that you've pulled at that point, because the next action point here is we'll enable safer, sustainable, diverse and inclusive communities that pull together by reducing antisocial behaviour and risk of harm and addressing any issues they face. In the last concerts, we had rowdy behaviour, antisocial behaviour, one lady was spiked, and another male concert goer was arrested on Dinham by the castle walls and led away in handcuffs by police. How do you square that with the Shropshire Plan?
I'm not going to answer that question in relation to the Shropshire Plan again. All I will say is that I'm conscious that statements have been made in the context of a question which you all warned about. The matter of public safety, the matter of crime and disorder has been raised with the police. The police have clearly set out their position. The police have not, and I can add this to the mix, been in contact with my clients about any issues that they felt were of concern that arose through the concerts that were held last year. Had they had concerns, I have no doubt, dealing with police officers day in and day out, as I do, that they would have raised those concerns directly and said, this is not good enough. That's not what's happened. The police have not been in touch at all.
I'd like to raise the 3rd point, please, out of the plan.
Can I just stop you there?
Yes.
We've had 2 long statements and a little tiny question tugged on the end of it. And so you're actually trying my patience as chair now, because these are statements, they're not questions. Certainly not ones that the applicants can actually answer. So if it refers to the local plan, then no, I don't think that's a valid question. Am I right? Yeah, so no.
Okay, then stop me on this point if you would, Chair. Ludlow is an attractive historic town with 420 listed buildings. We're paying to maintain those buildings, and we feel that we are going to be exploited by this proposal. How do we square that?
There's no question there.
Well, okay,
It's a
I'll
statement.
stop here then,
Okay,
Gav,
thank
because what I'm doing is trying to pull out salient points of the Shropshire plan that the council want to put in action. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. Any other representatives want to ask? Yeah, last but not least, hopefully, no.
Least, well aware of your willingness to cut one up if you don't. Again, Simon Burke, resident of Central Ludlow. Thank you for the explanations from the applicant and the applicant's lawyer. I do have a number of questions, Mr. Chairman. I'm aware of the time limits, but I do think most of them are pertinent since this is such an important matter. But before I launch into the questions that I had thought are necessary previously, I'd like to pick up on a couple of things that were said in the presentation. The applicant's lawyer made reference to various pieces of evidence from social media about business, about reception from the local community. Laying aside the quality of that evidence, which is at the very least highly unscientific, I would ask the following question. We are supposed to deal with the 4 licensing objectives in our questions and our statements. How does that information about business, about the response from local people collected in unscientific manner, relate to any of the 4 objectives?
Yeah, I'm more than happy to deal with that in my summing up. I think
No, I think I'd rather have the question answered now. Thank you.
I think that's the place for it. And so I'm also conscious that cross-examination, which is what we're entering into, is only permissible with your permission.
Mr. Mayor, I have to agree is that the solicitor has made a statement as such when he's answering questions. However, we don't then sort of like cross-examine him of what we said. So as to the quality of the evidence, he said it.
But not the point also about asking about the 4 licensing objectives is also not allowed at this stage.
If you've got a question regarding the 4 licensing objective of the applicant, then this is your opportunity to say yes. It's not your opportunity to say, but they weren't talking about the 4 objectives.
Thank you. Can I ask why the original application was for 15 days?
Because that's what the applicant sought. However, having listened to the representations that were made, it was agreed to reduce that number.
Then may I ask also the representative of Future Sounds, who did make a presentation earlier, and I understand therefore I'm entitled to ask questions on.
No, you can ask the applicants. Who chooses to answer is actually for a matter for them.
Okay, thank you. Then can I ask why is the application for an unlimited period?
The application is for an unlimited period because that is a fairly standard practice with these types of application. If it helps, I deal with a significant number of events in the open air or in castles or in stately homes, for example, and those are, as one would anticipate, without any end date. It is very rare these days to see any license application come forward with a single end date, unless it is a situation where the applicant only ever anticipates doing one event or a sequence of events for a year. It is hoped that with this license application and the license which is hoped to be granted, there will be a future partnership which will last into the future. There is no need to set out why, in any case, why one wants to have a limited license or a permanent license. Clearly, that's an applicant's discretion.
Thank you. The application refers to the 7,000 being slightly larger than the current 4,999. Is 40% increase right? Increase?
Yeah, I'll take that question from the way that it's put. I will point out, however, that the current license does not have any capacity limit on it whatsoever. And that's one of the advantages with granting this particular license, is that you can impose a capacity limit.
I thought the capacity limit was 4,999 license.
Yeah. Well, Chairman, I'm conscious that's a statement. I'm conscious that I do have the license in front of me. I'm conscious that you have access to the license. I will defer to the representative if he can show me where in the license there is a capacity limit. I've looked at it, there isn't one.
That seems to be a contradiction in the data that's been provided. Mr. Kent.
I'm struggling for relevance, but perhaps the licensing officer can help there.
Yeah, could I actually just come in? And I think that the issue here is a historic one. And I don't wish to put the licensing on the spot because it's not his fault, as they say. Many licenses, certainly back in 2005, when and subsequently when they were applied for with an application fee, which was relevant to the capacity of the premises. Now, what local authorities should have done at that time is that they should have imposed a condition on the license that you've paid the fee, so therefore you can have 499 or 4,999 on the license. That didn't happen with this particular license. The result of that is that the license currently has no capacity limit. The point, however, to all of this is that the license application that you have before you, which is the one that's being considered now, and the relevant factor, has had it volunteered that it has a capacity limit of 7,000 people on it. Now, you'll appreciate that that's not 9,999, which is the top of the band. It's something less than that. The application before you is for 7,000 people. That's something that's been assessed by the responsible authorities, and they have regarded that as satisfactory.
Did you want to add anything at all?
Unfortunately, Chair, we haven't got the, obviously, because of the historic occasion, we haven't got it. The way we work, obviously, is there is a number and there's a fee charge for applications. So the applicant pays a basic fee for that application. Yes, there's no, as Sister said, there's no limits on the numbers, but they are paying a basic fee. So the understanding of that is the basic fee is 499 without getting the books out and clarifying that and looking into other case law. Obviously, that's the way we determine it day to day.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Berg?
I choose to continue. I find that a bit unsatisfactory, but I'll continue with my questions. Okay, thank you. What is the problem with the current license, please? It surprises me that you need a new license at all, given what's just been said about the freedom under the current license. Why is a new license necessary? You're not limited to 4,999. The current license can achieve that. So why are we applying for a new license?
I don't think that's a relevant question. They're applying for a new license. That's what we're discussing today. And the advantage of that is that there are a new set of conditions that that make it better for the whole process. So I'm not sure there's a relevance of why we've got to go backwards to the old license.
Can one of the two representatives of the applicants please explain to me what a headline act is, how often, and how long they appear?
Yeah, that's an interesting question I can answer. Very simply, the headline act is the normal perception of it. It is that act which is the headline on the bill. I'm sure that everybody is familiar with the headline on the bill. It is that one act that is the main attraction to the event. The main act, you want to call it that, or the headline act, is typically an hour to an hour and a half long, but it very much depends on the performer. Clearly, it's not possible to define it in any more detail than that. It is just the name of that act that is the main attraction.
And will the literature that is issued by the licensees, should they succeed in this application, be very specific about which the headline act is? Saying it simply tops the bill seems a rather vague and loose definition.
Well, Chairman, I think it is obvious to those that look at the billing. Clearly, in terms of a billing of a typical advert, the headline act has their name larger than any other act that's on that material, if one wants to be pedantic about it. Sometimes it's in bold, but clearly there is emphasis on that act above all of the other acts, the supporting acts that may be on the same billing. There is something distinctive about that to make it a headline. I think that to go into any more detail about who is the headline act, other than declaring who a headline act is in terms of the consultation that's done with the local authority through the safety advisory group, I can be no more precise than that. It is evident for all to see.
It isn't pedantic at all. The point is that the application says on permissions that are, well, permissions, but suggested.
Mr. Burke, I think you've asked your questions. I think you've made
All right.
very, and I think maybe the councillors may come back on that same subject.
Thank you.
We need to move on.
May I make one observation, please?
Our observation isn't a question.
No, true. That's true. I'll have to use that for my question by presentation. Why do rehearsals and sound checks take place so early? We were told that last year they started at 10 o'clock. This time they're going to start at 9 o'clock. Why is it necessary to have these so early?
But Chair, I'm conscious that the sound check itself is not a licensable activity. It is covered by the Environmental Protection Act. It is covered by the Noise Act. The sound checks are done at a time that is appropriate, depending on the local circumstances, depending on what act is available, and depending on the nature of the sound check that needs to be done. We appreciate that there is a different variety of sound checks. Yes, clearly the conditions, I've just been pointed to condition 42, rehearsals and sound checks will only occur between the hours of 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. But the purpose behind it is obviously to make sure that the levels are set at a level which is appropriate for that act and appropriate to make sure that the locals are not disturbed. I think it would be I'm sorry, but if that's found to be amusing, that's disappointing, because the purpose of a sound check is in part to make sure that the levels which are specified in the licence can be achieved. One does not want to be messing around with sound levels at 10 o'clock in the evening, trying to get them right. That is why it's done during the day, when there is a higher background noise burden, when the impact of that sound is going to be less and less intrusive, and therefore it can be more accurately adjusted.
Sound checks continue high. Is it the case that in conducting a sound check, in order to make sure that the events themselves do not exceed 70, or for whatever a headline act is, 75 decibels, the sounds that are produced will exceed those limits in order to make sure that the performance itself will not?
No, that's not necessarily the case.
What will the noise management plan consist of, and how will it be shared with residents?
the noise management plan is a document that's set out at, I think it's condition 29, as part of the event management plan. That is a matter quite clearly which has some technical issue of it to do with sound generation levels, which require indeed dispersal, which require some expertise to analyse. And that is why there is consultation with the Environmental Health Department, which is the responsible authority and has the necessary expertise to analyse those levels. There's no intention at this stage to distribute detailed proposals to local residents. One has to question the value of that when the objective is actually making sure that nuisance doesn't occur. That's the objective.
How have you worked with local residents in the past, for example, for the 2023 event, and how far from the venue has that cooperation been extended?
But Chairman, you've heard how there has been consultation with the Town Council, and the Town Council is seen as the representative of those living in the area. There has been engagement through the telephone calls that have been made, but agreed that there has not been a formal consultation process with local residents. In one respect, of course, that's the purpose of the consultation on this particular application. I'm not aware that there's been any approach to negotiate on that. Yeah, so you've done this. Yeah. Oh, and sorry, I'm also instructed that there has been less drop. I think the question then has been how far afield.
Interesting that percent.
In the vicinity of the premises. Quite clearly, if residents do have issues that they want to raise with my client, then the appropriate way of dealing with that is to get in contact with them and discuss it. Clearly, there will be, under these proposals, an advance notification of what events are going to take place, and that would be an appropriate place to consult into the future. But also, obviously, that the Town Council has a role to play, and we're grateful for the role that they have played and the contribution they've made in the past.
One last question, please. We had expected from the events in 2023 that we would receive feedback from the council about the conduct of the events. We who live in central Ludlow have received no such feedback. Will there be a commitment to providing such feedback to local residents on the occasion of any events that take place under the Future Sound licence?
Well, Chairman, I think the situation that you've already grasped is that the council is not my client. I can't comment on what the council's done. I'm sure that it would be interested to hear any comments that local residents have got. But likewise, my client would be interested to engage with local residents if there are some positive comments that can be had and a discussion going forward about how things can be improved. But there's no objection to that.
The question was, would there be a feedback report? Yes, this is.
I don't see the value, put it this way, in terms of producing a report which goes to residents. Clearly, there is an option, and sometimes there is a value in having a debrief. I'm sure that will be done with all of the responsible authorities. Environmental health will, of course, be at the forefront of dealing with any residents' complaints, and anything that's said will be fed back through that process. The whole point of having a safety advisory group is to include and participate in that consultation process and feedback. No doubt there will be feedback to the safety advisory group.
But possibly not to residents. Thank you very much.
Turn the mic off. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Any other representative want to ask questions? Okay. You can just state your name when you turn the mic on. Thank you.
Name's Derek Broadley, resident of Dinham. I have a very simple question for the applicant. What is the difference in terms of their bottom line profits in terms of holding 8 concerts a year as opposed to 4 concerts a year, which I believe is the basis of this application?
Chairman, I can tell from your facial expression you don't expect that question. Absolutely not. It's not relevant to the licensing directive.
I think it's extremely relevant.
Yes, you've had your answer. Any more questions? Thank you. No other representatives want to ask questions? No. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to ask the committee members whether they've got any questions for the applicant at all.
We've gone through it thoroughly. Yes, I think we are.
More than, sorry. So I go on. Sorry. I've got a question then for the applicant. Why do we need to go to 75 decibels for the headline act and the rest of the occasion that are a mere 70 decibels?
Yes, simply that's a matter of perception for the audience.
With a headline act, there is an expectation that it is a more spectacular, more well received, and therefore more. I'm just trying to think of the words.
Noisy.
Very noisy.
Impactful, indeed. Experience for those participating, and it also emphasises that difference between the support act and the headline act. Clearly, the 75 decibels that is there is an increase on the support level, but it is a level that one would expect of any concert, and if anything, the support acts are actually at a lower level than one would expect.
Would there be more than one headline act per the 4 days?
No.
I.e., would there be one for the night?
No, it would be one support, one headline act per night.
Would the applicant be agreeable to a condition that said that the headline act would be told to environmental health, so that there will be an understanding of the raising decibels? Because what's going to happen with the public is they're going to hear and notice. Well, we can't go by times because it depends on who come on or not. But they're going to hear it noisier. They're going to be phoning, and as long as environmental health know that you're within that parameter, then, and I think they ought to know when it's going to be raised decibel.
Yes, indeed. As you've heard, Environmental Health were there last year and were obviously fundamentally involved, and so would have known. There is no issue at all with the condition that the headline act will be notified to, I would suggest, the licensing authority to keep things within the remit of the licensing act. Within,
I mean, as part of the process before today,
yeah, within 14 days. Now, one has to be careful with these things. Speaking with the voice of experience, what happens if the headline act suddenly gets run over by a bus, or more likely gets a cold, gets some sort of throat infection? There needs to be some process of a late notification. But a 14-day notification under normal circumstances, condition, there's no objection.
Okay, thank you. No other questions regarding that. So we can go to items 5 now, where persons who've made a representation present their case. Any other person who has made a representation to the application will be given an opportunity to outline their case. Presentations will take place in the following order. To be fair, I'll leave it to your order.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to volunteer to go first.
All right, thank you.
Okay, just to repeat, I'm here in my capacity as chair of Ludlow Civic Society. The society is a charity of over 300 members living in or around Ludlow, and is concerned with the historic environment of Ludlow and the well-being of its residents. I'm conscious of protocol at this meeting, and I can guarantee you, Mr. Chairman, that my statement will be an amplification, no pun intended, on our previous statement. Having carefully considered the application, our conclusion is that we reject the application for 15 or 8 events as proposed and modified. We would accept 4 such events per year under the same licence as used last year, or with more strict modifications. Our reasoning is as follows. There were 4 days of such concerts in the castle last summer, so the residents of Central London know exactly what to expect. In fact, should this application be approved, the situation will be worse many times over in terms of duration and impact, especially since there is a proposed increase of numbers from a maximum of 5,000 to 7,000 people. Just a reminder, Mr. Chairman and councillors and the committee, the population of Ludlow is 10,000. In addition to the 4 days of concerts last year, the operators required 5 days to deliver, set up and take down heavy equipment, all carried on huge lorries that had difficulty in navigating the narrow streets of Ludlow. Roads were closed and residents had difficulty in accessing their own homes. Moreover, the events square immediately in front of the castle, an area enjoyed by residents and visitors for relaxation and socialising, and the castle gardens, were out of action for at least 10 days. This new application would impact on the ability of residents and visitors to enjoy Ludlow to an even greater and unacceptable degree, and therefore constitutes a public nuisance. Last year, the noise and disturbance for those in the immediate vicinity around the castle, by which I mean principally but not exclusively Dinham, Mill Street, Broad Street and the Linney, were intolerable. There was no escaping the noise. It was impossible to sit peacefully in one's garden or to concentrate in one's house. This venue is not an isolated field like Glastonbury or an enclosed auditorium. It is an open-air urban space surrounded by dwellings. Inside the castle walls, the sound might be music of a high quality, but by the time it escapes outside and bounces around the building, it becomes a disturbing, cacophonous noise. On the subject of noise, and this is most important, best practice and industry norms are enshrined in the Noise Council Control Code of Practice on Environmental Noise at Concerts, the so-called POP code. And that code was actually drawn up in consultation with the Environmental Health Institute. Section 3, Table 1 of the Noise Council's control states that for events of 1 to 3 days, quote, the music noise level should not exceed 65 decibels over a 15-minute period of 1 metre from the facade of any noise-sensitive premises. And I suspect, Mr. Chairman, that that's where the figures that environmental health and environmental protection are come from that they are using. But crucially, that very same document states, and this is most important, additional discharges can arise if events occur on more than 3 consecutive days without a reduction in the permitted music noise levels. It then states that events for 4 to 12 calendar days per year, i.e. the application before us, as 4 or 8 days, that, quote, the music noise level should not exceed the background noise level by more than 15 decibels over a 15-minute period. Just to repeat, 15 decibels over the background noise level. Last year, I did not carry a sound meter with me, but I can assure the committee that events were over a 4-day period and that levels were well over this. The sound could be heard all over Ludlow. People were dancing to the music on top of Whitcliffe, some half a mile from the venue. I would humbly and respectfully suggest that the Environmental Protection, Environmental Health section of the Council take cognizance of this code of practice, which is widely used in all local authorities and, as I say, used by Shrewsbury Town Council. And I can provide further details if necessary. 4 days is a crucial difference over 3 days, and it reflects the impact of the duration of the concert. There will be people who support this application, but let me say this, it is easy to support this proposal if you do not bear the negative consequences. Some point to the economic benefits to the town. Well, some businesses benefit and others don't. Certainly revenue flows to the Leeds-based company Future Sounds and to Paris Estates. But fundamentally, it's a basic principle of ethics that you can't use the argument of financial benefit and entertainment for one group to justify inflicting misery and distress on another. All its merits, that is the central flaw in such utilitarian reasoning, and why the rights of individuals need to be respected. On this point, I respectfully draw the committee's attention to the Human Rights Act 1998, Article 1, Protocol 1, which is, I notice, is enshrined in Shropshire Council's own policy documents. Every natural or legal person is entitled to the peaceful enjoyment of his possessions. We submit that this application before us destroys the peaceful enjoyment of possessions for a significant number of people, and indeed the ability of many most affected to work from home. Finally, on the subject of economic benefits, let me make the obvious point that it is the very residents of Ludlow who object to this application that keep the town and its economy alive and buoyant through their payment of council taxes, the use of the local shops and services, and of course the huge sums paid to local businesses and tradespeople to restore and maintain Ludlow's listed buildings that are their homes. In conclusion, Ludlow is a historically important and vibrant medieval and Georgian town, not an amusement theme park, not Disney World, and certainly not an urban Glastonbury. Towns and cities across Europe are waking up to the problem of over-tourism, and this application is an example of that problem. We reject this application. It is commercially exploitative, a distorting imposition on the life of the town, damaging to the health and well-being of residents, destructive of the human rights of a significant number of people, and would constitute an unacceptable public nuisance. The Town Council rejects it, the Civic Society rejects it, and I would invite this committee to reject it also. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. If you just stay there, please. So you'll now have an opportunity to ask any relevant questions of those who've made representations. And the order I'll take the questions in is the licensing officer, the applicant, and the committee. So first of all, licensing officer.
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Applicant.
Chair, I'll make this.
Oh, go on.
I'll make it easy. No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee.
No questions.
Thank you. So the next representative.
Hello, my name is Margaret Cartwright and I live very close to the castle. Last year, I didn't know there were going to be any concerts until I saw them advertised on social media. I didn't think that much about it, but wow, was I unprepared for the impact of these concerts. The noise was absolutely excruciating. There was absolutely no warning of going to be these so-called sound checks that came out of the blue. I was in the garden. Honestly, I thought I was having a brain hemorrhage or some kind of brain injury. I had to clasp my hands to my head. It was hurting, absolutely hurting my ears and inside my head. I think part of the problem is that the noise does funny things in Ludlow. It bounces around. There are a lot of high walls over around gardens, and it seemed to be bouncing around like a squash ball in our back garden. And I was in the garden at the time. It was absolutely excruciating, ear splitting. Honestly thought I was having some sort of stroke. I didn't know. Eventually, I obviously worked out, I was totally unprepared for this, that it was coming from the castle. I went round to the castle. There were some so-called security people there who were not only, I was going to say, they weren't, not only were they not helpful, they were totally unhelpful. I said, please can you convey that there's a problem here? We can't be in our garden. It's awful. They weren't very helpful. No, they couldn't do anything. Went home, tried to phone the castle several times, got no reply. The phone wasn't answered. Eventually, I think it clicked through to some sort of answering machine. So clearly nobody was there. I mean, they're supposed to be contactable and you're supposed to be able to approach them, but that was certainly not my experience. In the end, I went down to the town council, explained all the while this noise is going on, bouncing around. And I think eventually somebody from the town council was able to phone. It's not only the noise itself of the concerts, it's the days beforehand. It was difficult to sleep because there's transport trundling up through Dinham, bringing staging, loos, and all seating, and God knows what else. Then you've got the concerts, and then after the concerts, it's all the noise and all the collection of everything being taken down. So it's a thorough public nuisance. The car park is out of use, the castle car park. Apparently the performers stay there. Why they can't stay in the castle, I don't know. That's, so people, the usual visitors coming to Ludlow quickly learn that they can't come during that time. So that's a loss of trade for some people. When the concerts are on, you can't do anything in your own home. Normal life becomes impossible. You can't watch television. You have to turn up the television volume. Then that becomes massively uncomfortable. You can't go and do things on the computer. You can't go and sit and read a book. Normal life is impossible. Normal life during the day is also impossible because I've already mentioned about the car park, Castle Square. And then, of course, when the people come out from the concerts, there's an absolute huge throng of people, congested. I'm surprised there aren't more accidents, and certainly there was a car stolen from Mill Street. They eventually go, but they themselves are very noisy, and they leave behind a massive load of litter. So what do we have to do the next morning is get up and clear the litter from the front of our houses and in the street. So all in all, I was not prepared. You know, the impact of these concerts, I had no warning of, I had no idea about it. And now, having experienced last year's set of concerts, I really wouldn't want to experience any more. They may do all the measurements, I don't know the sound, but I'm telling you, when you're sitting in your own home, a normal life is not being permitted, then something is going wrong. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Now, you were representing Mr. Thomas May, who wasn't able to come today. But
Yeah,
we got
Mr. Thomas Evans.
But we got a lot of all about you.
Yes. Well, I could say everything Mr. Evans has put forward in his letter, but to be fair, a lot of it has been covered and is being covered. He also made the point about the almost ankle-high litter, bottles, cartons, and all the rest of it, which I've also feel that I've covered. Okay, thank you.
If you just stay there a second, then licensing officer, have you got any questions?
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Applicant?
Just two. You said that you contacted the council. On which day was that you contacted?
On the day of the first sound checks, whatever day that was. Nobody answered the phone, and I phoned several times.
You've mentioned that already, thank you. And did you contact the Environmental Health Department of the council?
I went down to the town council.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Then go back to your seat. Thank you. Oh, we haven't got any questions, have we? Sorry. No. Jumping the gun. Any other representatives want to make their presentation?
Speed, I'm really only confirming the evidence from John Cartwright. Would you like me to? I'm happy to.
Well, it's a matter for you, but
well,
you're right. If you're just duplicating what's been said before, but you may be reinforcing it, but it is a matter for you.
Then I'll speak if I may, please. Thank you. Jennifer Gill, resident of Dinham. I'm speaking on behalf of myself and my husband, Robert Gill. As Ludlow residents, we express our disappointment and dismay for the proposal to hold 8 concerts in Ludlow Castle grounds, and we strongly object to the licensing application, namely a proposal for 8 live music events with alcohol. One such event was held last year, 20th to the 23rd July. This 4-day event stimulated numerous complaints about levels of noise, rowdy behaviour, the impact of road closures on vulnerable people, congested parking and access of residents to their homes. And this is between the local residents. There were a number of anecdotal reports of antisocial behaviour around the town in the evenings. For example, I've already quoted one young lady was spiked in the hand and is still unwell, and another concert participant was arrested and led away in handcuffs by police. Both incidents can be verified. Ludlow is a small town, but 5,000 to 999 people to potentially visit each of these 8 events over the time period suggested, May the 1st to September the 1st, only invites further trouble, disorder, and would generate a grave public nuisance. What is proposed is a series of musical concerts in a residential area. The venue is not isolated in a field like Glastonbury. There are residence houses all around the castle. The noise and disturbance resulting from implementation of this application would adversely affect the health and well-being of these residents, some of which are elderly and infirm. This is yet another attempt to turn Ludlow into a money-generating site at the expense of the well-being of its central population. Ludlow is an attractive historic town with over 420 listed buildings. Most of these are privately owned and kept in a good state of repair by their owners. In effect, it's the residents paying to maintain the attractive state of Ludlow and who are now being exploited by this proposal. We object to these events on the grounds that they will constitute an unbearable public nuisance for residents, particularly in the conservation area of central Ludlow. We have a conservation area and we should be looking after it. Ludlow is a thriving town maintained by local business and residents and already enjoys an ample and sufficient range of fairs, festivals and events. It is not a theme park. The distress to residents in the area affected cannot be justified by the financial gain of Powys Estates and Leeds-based company Future Sound Events, who are only interested in the bottom line, which is profit. Both organisations, Powys Estates and Future Sound Events, promised to give residents feedback following last year's concerts, which they dismally failed to do. When writing to them to give our feedback, their reply was defensive and our concerns were batted away as if they were not important. I believe that Powys Estates are losing faith and respect from the residents living in Dinham and its environs, and that Ludlow Castle will no longer be regarded as an asset to Ludlow's community. Thank you.
Thank you. If I just point out to the remaining people who might want to speak, I did say right at the beginning, there is no need to read out representations or reiterate details of written representations. It's about key, salient, brief summary points. So perhaps I can't influence yours, but future ones. Thank you. So, licensing officer, have you got any questions?
No questions, thank you, Chair.
Applicant? No, thank you.
Thank you.
Derek Broadley, resident of Dinham. I should simply like to reiterate the points made by my colleagues. This application talks about balance. Indeed, requested, stated that your objective is to create a right balance. It is our view that currently 4 concerts per year is a reasonable contribution to the economic life of Ludlow, and any further than that is simply interested in the bottom line of the applicants. Period.
Thank you. Licensing officer, any questions?
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Applicant? No. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Good afternoon. Councillor Stuart Waite, Ludlow Town Council. The Mayor gives his apologies. His father's unwell. Thank you, Chair and councillors. So a last minute stand-in. I've just written some notes during the course of this. You've had the council's formal submission and representation against this application. So I've just got a couple of things to add to it, which may expand on some points and reaffirm some points. As everybody knows, Ludlow is a medieval town with no infrastructure. It's small single carriageways on one-way system and practically no parking in existence. During the events, this is amplified by the closure of the Castle Street car park. The castle is entirely unsuitable for large-scale music events. It's not like Easton Castle, Warwick Castle, which have infrastructure and car parking. It's a medieval town centre. Speaking to the point of public safety, the castle has only a single point of ingress and egress from the venue, leading out into Castle Square and Event Square. And the council are concerned that a massive increase in numbers attending the events would not be able to exit in an orderly fashion in case of an emergency. Heaven forbid there was such an event as Hillsborough or the Manchester Arena event. We don't think that the emergency services will be able to attend in a sensible fashion due to the road closures and volume of people and traffic. Also speaking to public safety, we're confident that the organisers and applicant have produced a detailed plan for management and safety of the public. And I'm sure that the responsible authorities have looked at this in detail. This may be true of the event venue in itself, but it doesn't help the surrounding environs of Ludlow, where people are corralled in a small town centre. So basically speaking, larger numbers of people equals less safety. Speaking to the matter of crime prevention and disorder, music events, while attracting large numbers of outside people to enjoy the event, will also unfortunately attract a certain percentage of troublesome individuals, such as pickpockets and drug dealing. With the existing 5,000 limit of the castle's licence, this limit is potentially manageable. But the system now, I believe, is saturated, and any increase in numbers would potentially cause chaos and the risk of harm to the public should numbers increase, particularly to children and elderly. Speaking to the matter of public nuisance, all concerts will obviously incur some level of nuisance to the public. It's the nature of the beast. The problem is not the 4 days of consecutive events, it's the setup period either side, which is the larger nuisance to the town centre. Last year it spread over 18 days, 8 days beforehand, the 4 days of the event, and 6 days takedown afterwards. During setup and takedown, the organisation requires the exclusive use of Event Square in front of the castle for loading and unloading and cross-loading vehicles. The Event Square is a focal point of the town centre in the summer. Lots of smaller events are held on that. There's market traders, people like the air ambulance, the police do informative and the educational activities on the square.
I'll just stop you there a minute. We're here to talk about the licensing area, which is the castle. You've now talked
about public nuisance relating to the licence application in the specific area of the castle. It's the environs immediately before it and the setup and takedown incurred by the event as will be licensed.
If I can just ask you to keep it, because all these things are already in our pack.
Okay. The council are quite willing to rearrange all of the other civic events and things around a 4-day event. But if there were to be multiple 4-day events, the tranche of days either side of that would make the centre of Ludlow virtually unusable as amenity for the locals and for visiting visitors. An interesting fact is that Powys Castle has specifically excluded the applicant from entering the site between 9 AM and 5 PM, which were in setup and shutdown periods. This is so that they can maintain their own fee-paying public access to the castle. And I think that means that they have to start work at 5 in the morning and stop at 9 PM, so that the castle can do their normal thing. And then in the evenings...
Can I just stop you again? Now we're going to another castle somewhere else. You've got to keep it relevant to the licensing objectives of what we're here discussing.
It's a nuisance caused by the event. Public nuisance. and then again from 5 p.m. till 10 p.m. in the evening, with large vehicles and noise and disturbance to local residents. It also prevents the other activities on the square taking place because they have sole use of it. Ludlow Town Council is actually supportive of the event. We think it's a great addition to the mix of events during the season in Ludlow. However, the Town Council object very, very strongly. We had a pretty much unanimous vote of any change to the existing licence plan. And we would suggest that respectfully the committee turn this application down. There is a pre-existing application by the site venue, which more than adequately covers any requirements for the events as suggested. However, if you do wish to support and can't find any reason not to support the application, I would like for certain restrictions to be put in place, such that it would be a limited 1-year trial, not an open-ended forever licence. The sound levels are set to 70 decibels maximum for any event, not just the headline, and that you would restrict it to a 4-day single multi-day event rather than several during the season. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Licensing officer,
No questions. Thank you, Chair.
applicant,
No, thank you.
councillors, Chair. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Cognizant of your earlier comments regarding trying to keep things brief and to the point, I have rather a large number of things to say, so I will pause as I work through my document to try to avoid, but I will be pausing in order to achieve that. I understand completely that the committee can only consider things that relate to the 4 licensing objectives, and I think that most of my colleagues have attempted to keep to that. So I'll attempt to do the same. So first of all, prevention of public nuisance. Merely to emphasise the point that many have made, as you said, Mr. Chairman, the emphasis can be important. We experienced considerable noise issues at our house last year, less than 300 metres from the castle, and that included loud early day noise presumably associated with the sound checks. And I note again that starting at 9 o'clock means that these sounds and the sounds of the events themselves can extend over a 13.5-hour period, some of which is very uncertain testing times. We couldn't escape the noise in or outside the house. In extended warm weather, remember last year it was actually quite wet, in extended warm weather, this is going to be more difficult. We complained about noise in 2023. We got through to the office, an annoyed person followed up, good, checked and said it was within what was allowed. I think this is the core argument. It's not that the limits are exceeded, it is that the limits that are proposed or in operation previously did not prevent significant detriment of public nuisance. Again, regarding feedback after the event, my wife contacted the castle manager, said we would like to be part of any further discussions with residents, but there has been no follow-up. We have subsequently decided the best thing to do is not to be in town for this event. We'll just wrap it up in our summer holidays, take 4 days away. Can't take 12 days away. And it's not a pleasant feeling that one is being forced from one's home. And the increased number of days, as I say, increases the problem. We're talking perhaps, we can't tell because the applicants haven't been precise, and the Parish Council is not here to offer their side of things, but potentially it's an increase from 4 days with 4,999 to 4 days with 4,999 and 8 days with 7,000 people. I've actually submitted a document which calculates the implication of those figures. It multiplies up, it looks at how many people are involved in this, and it compares them with the size of the town, with the footfall within the town, which is available from Shropshire County Council documentation. And the largest figure that I was able to obtain for that was for September 2022, where the figure averaged out at 6,600, roughly speaking, people a day. Yeah? So you will see that if 7,000 people are allowed in, that is a doubling of the footfall within the town. I submit that it is unlikely that that is not going to generate further public nuisance. I have submitted a document which deals with these numbers and does these comparisons, so it's unhelpful for me to go through them. But the numbers are colossal. They're absolutely colossal. Percentage changes are colossal, and the numbers are colossal. These numbers, huge though they are not remotely reflected in the licence application. The supporting statement from Paris Estates, they're not presenting today, so we can't say more about that, or the submissions for the responsible authorities. Now, I've heard it said that the responsible authorities have therefore taken all these things into consideration. I would like to be assured eventually that the committee agrees that they have done this. I am actually quite concerned that what's been said by the responsible authorities has not fully taken into account these points. I absolutely take the point. They are the experts, and you are bound to take due attention to what appointed experts say. I accept that, but I would submit that the sizes of these numbers need separate consideration by the committee. People have said it's not Leeds, it's not Reading, it's not Glastonbury, it's Ludlow. Public safety and prevention of crime and disorder. So there are some important questions about what will go on outside the licensing arena, but will have an impact under the headings of public safety and prevention of crime and disorder. So again, I take the point, it's about the event, but I also say that some of the issues that are covered by the licensing, or rather the licensing objectives, are expressed in such a way that problems that occur outside the licensing environment should be considered because they contribute to these or threaten these objectives. So will traffic continue to be allowed access to the sound centre via King Street, for example? We don't know. If it is continuing to be allowed, there'll be a considerable increase in traffic. Bell Lane, which is where I live, a very narrow street. Every time the centre of Ludlow is closed, traffic is redirected down Bell Lane, and a narrow one-way street becomes a two-way street. Now, this is done, I believe, with the welfare of residents in mind, because closing the central square severely restricts access to residents. So this is an important welfare point. But the original policy was introduced when it was necessary to do this relatively infrequently. Mayfair, perhaps. A couple of other things that are going on. We're now talking about this occurring much more frequently. So the risk of accident is increasing. And as I said, this is a narrow road. We only have one car passing at a time. And it is central to the reorganisation that is necessary for events that result in the closure of the square for this to take place in order for residents to have access. But of course, it's not just residents, it's anybody who's in the town. And as far as we can tell, and we would like this to be, I would like this to be considered very carefully, there is typically no monitoring of arrangements, traffic and road safety, and no enforcement, for example, of the 20-mile-an-hour limit that exists in the centre of town. And I think, sorry, pause to take out some of this stuff. Signage is also not kept up to date on when traffic is redirected down Bell Lane. Policing. So again, with respect to the licensing objectives, a recent report to Ludlow Council just last night, the police indicated they are understaffed even under normal conditions. These are not normal conditions. It's nice. How can they be expected to be able to cope with the extra demand at event times? How? And this wasn't mentioned in the police submission as a response to concentrated entirely on what was going on within the confines of the putative licensed site. It's very difficult to have confidence in the ability of authorities to properly safeguard public safety when the number of people is expanded so greatly and so frequently, with police representation non-existent or at best inadequate. We can't rely on the security guards that operate at the castle. They have no writ outside their event. None at all. And indeed, I would be the first person to complain if they started behaving as though they were police. So none of the responses from responsible authorities contained in the licence officer's report show any sign of the specific characteristics of the town having been taken into consideration. So suggested conditions, which I can understand you asked for to try and make it positive. Obviously, my basic position would be leave it as it is. Leave the events as they are. For events, 5,000 people a day, blah, 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 although exactly what this current licence allows seems at the very least be opaque. But if it can't be completely rejected, then I would like the committee to consider a further reduction in the number of days to less than 8. These are potentially excellent, remember, in terms of the impact that it has on the town. A reduction in the noise levels, which are 70 or 75 decibels, for the reasons that my fellow complainants have drawn attention to. Reduce the time for the sound checks. It starts at 9 o'clock and the socially goes on to 8 o'clock. But the point is, the disturbance lasts fully from 9 o'clock to whenever the event ceases, which is now said to be 10:30 in the evening. I would like it to be the case that traffic in the town centre is monitored and a policy for the elimination of congestion and danger to pedestrians is developed, enacted, enforced, and communicated to the residents. We're completely in the black on this, have completely no idea. Traffic management, not to include frequent reassignment of traffic flows in Bell Lane. It's going to get dangerous.
You're actually going in now to the, we'd like it here, we'd like it there, we'd like this road stopped, we'd like more police officers. This is not what we're here for today. I'm sorry, and you're not being brief.
Okay, I'll finish.
Oh, right, okay.
Almost brief then, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, not too bad.
Thank you. 5 out of 10.
Licence officer, any questions?
No question, Chair, thank you.
Applicant?
I may have one or two. I'm conscious that you submitted a significant document yesterday with data, and that looks at the footfall. Were you aware of the report that went to Ludlow Town Council on the 31st of July last year that talked about visitors? And that report talked about 259,000 visitors looking at the website in conjunction with Visit Shropshire. And it talks about Corve Street attracting 124,000 visitors during the year, and Castle Square with 75,000 visitors. Yes, I'm conscious. However, I am asking a question here, and given that the numbers are extrapolated, were you aware of that data, and has that been included within your report?
No, I wasn't aware of the data, and you'll find the data from that I have used in my report, or you'll find the source of it footnoted at the end of the table, so you can consult in the necessary attention. So,
okay, thank you, Mr. Lowe.
Thank you very much.
Now go to section 6, which is closing remarks from each party, whether there is a caveat. Each party will now be permitted a brief opportunity to make any closing remarks. This should not be a repeat of the case already made or discussions during the questions, but you may have some points to clarify or additional comments as to the result of the questions and discussion. And if you've got nothing further to say, you do not need to speak. So I'm going to do it in the order of licensing officer, other persons, and then the applicant. So licensing officer.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to re-emphasise why you're here today. So it's to consider and determine the application. To do this, you must give appropriate weight to the steps that are necessary to promote the four licensed objectives. Any representations, the 182 Guidance and Licensing Act 2003 and Shropshire Council's licensing policy 2019 to 2024. You then may grant the application in full or in part, subject to such conditions deemed necessary and appropriate to the four licensed objectives, or refuse if deemed appropriate, again in relation to the four licensed objectives. When it comes to your decision, it must be justified and provide support and evidence after to all parties involved, and the decision can be appealed within 21 days by all parties. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we now go to other persons. So if you want to say anything in addition, bear in mind that I think I was actually quite lenient on how long all of you got to make the present.
All sides.
Okay. So does anyone want to say anything else? Cartwright?
Just very quickly, I know there will be a time of deliberation up to this committee meeting. Would it be helpful if I submitted the Noise Council's Code of Practice to Environmental Protection or Environmental Health? I really do feel they haven't taken sufficient cognizance of that. The applicant refers to adhering to best practice industry norms and evidence from current research. The Noise Council's document is the one most widely used. It's used by Shropshire, by Shrewsbury Town Council for events in the quarry. I think people of Ludlow would be much aggrieved if it wasn't taken notice of for events in Ludlow Town Centre. And the crucial point, and I'll finish here, Mr. Chairman, is this difference between 3 days and 4 days. We keep talking about 70 decibels. Once you're into 4 days continuous concerts, 70 decibels doesn't apply. The limit is much stricter and much lower. And I really feel that's very important. So my question, Mr. Chairman, is would it be helpful if I submitted that document either to your good self or to the licensing officer or anybody you'd like to nominate?
Well, I certainly don't want it, and I'm not sure the committee do. You are free if you want to send it to the licensing team or environmental health, but that's after the event.
But it'd be good to know, Mr. Chairman, if they're actually going to read it. I'm free to submit anything any time.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Anybody else?
No, I think it's been rung out, actually.
Right, okay, yeah, that's great, thank you. So we go to the applicant for the closing statement, thank you.
Chairman, I'd like to surprise you with, I've got nothing to say, however, I'm not.
I do have a few things to say. I will be as brief as I possibly can. I'm conscious of the hour and I'm grateful for your indulgence. The situation is, as I set out before, that this is a premises which has a licence already. And I'm conscious that in the representations that have been made, there have been a number of comments about leave things as they are. Well, our submission is that that is not a sensible prospect given what you have in front of you. You have a situation where you have a licence which is entirely suitable for the day-to-day running of the castle, and indeed it's satisfactory for a number of events during the year. You heard that from the objectives. What you have now, though, is a licence application which imposes in its proposals a whole host of much more stringent conditions which aren't clear and have been produced in conjunction with the responsible authority. I do need to address some of the issues that have been raised by the representatives in their submissions, and some of this, of course, is not relevant to the licensing objectives. The question about whether the residents knew that something was going to happen or not. Yes, it is of course a benefit to let people know what's happening, because the fear of uncertainty is a very significant fear. And you've heard that there is no objection, certainly, to announcing what days events are going to take place. That's built within the offer that you have on the application. It's been suggested that the bottom line about making profit is the fundamental reason for this application. That's not necessarily the right answer, of course. The right answer is that this is an application.
I'm sorry, but I do feel that it then just respect to.
Sorry.
Yes.
Mr. Payne. Yeah, we've allowed everybody to say their piece, and other people are allowed to say it without people coming in and laughing and whatever in the background. It's not very civil. No.
But the thing is, if points are being raised,
no,
you know, I feel that we should be able to respond.
No, we've had all the response all the way through. This is a closing statement. It is a statement and is not open to be questioned. So please give everybody the respect that they need.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that. This is not a matter of just simply profit rules everything. This is a matter of a license to be held by those who are putting on the event. And that is really quite an important factor in making your decision. It is something that those who are organising the event have voluntarily put forward. They haven't been forced into doing this at all. They have put forward a whole set of proposals which are currently entirely covered by the existing licence.
Now, against the application, we have what were described as a number of anecdotal events and issues happening within a residential area. I do not need to draw your attention to the nature of the area at all, and its presence as a town centre. What has happened with this application is that there has been an extensive consultation, discussion with the responsible authorities, and you will be aware of the Secretary of State's guidance, especially in relation to police evidence and how you should view that. Now, what has been done is that those expert authorities, including environmental health, the police, the fire service, have all been involved in considering this application. They are the ones who have the necessary technical skills and abilities and experience in dealing to make an assessment. Now, I said at the beginning, I don't relish your job of balancing matters. Well, in some respects, the job has been made easy for you because the responsible authorities have done some of that balancing for you. They have looked at the proposals, they've looked at whether there are some sufficient emergency exits, and you'll see there was no representation from the fire that makes any issue of that. They've looked at whether the sound levels are adequate as a control level, and you've heard from me about environmental health being on site during events last year. And of course, the balance that you will run there is the balance of environmental health having been present versus the evidence that you've heard today. The balance is whether there is, on the face of it, public nuisance. Well, clearly, environmental health were not of the view that there was a public nuisance last year, because otherwise they would have served a noise abatement notice. They haven't done so. The other point is, had they felt that the sound level was above the permitted level, and I refer to that in terms of the Noise Act, then again, they were obliged to either serve an abatement notice or serve a notice under the Noise Act. Neither have been done. So what we have here is a situation where it is accepted that any event will cause a certain degree of sound, not noise, sound to be transmitted. But the level of that sound is the thing that has to be balanced. Environmental health say with a noise level of 70 decibels for Support Act, 75 for the Headline Act, that is acceptable. In terms of what they've considered, I rather anticipate they will have considered the code of conduct. They will have, sorry, code of conduct, the POP code. I'm sure that they will have considered other standards as well, I'm sure that they will have added to the mix their experience of visiting the premises. The other thing that you were asked by representatives to take into account are things that are clearly not relevant to a licensable activity, and you'll be aware of the case law in terms of that. Things like sound checks. They are matters which are covered by different legislation. If a sound check, which is not a licensable activity, is found to be causing nuisance, it is beholden upon the local authority to serve a noise abatement notice under Section 80 of the Environmental Protection Act 90. Again, I've made the point that it hasn't been done. Your attention is drawn to access through the town centre. Well, I've given you some statistics about the number of people that visit the town centre, and I've given you details of road closures, those were mentioned in the evidence. Road closures where residents still do have access. So what you have here is an application before you which improves on the situation. It is something that is a living document because of the process involving the safety advisory group. And the one thing that I've learned, certainly through the many years of dealing with events, is that no two events are the same. And having a licence condition which requires notification to a safety advisory group or notification of proposals in advance is a beneficial thing to do. That is why it is built into the application that you have in front of you. So as things stand, you have the existing licence and you have an application for a better licence. Better, admittedly, in terms of controls for local residents, but also adding clarity to matters such as what the numbers are at the premises, how many events can take place. At the moment, as I've addressed you, those numbers are unlimited and the number of events are unlimited. So, Chairman, members of the panel, I commend the application to you, ask that you approve that and leave that at that point.
Okay, thank you very much. I've just got just going through the to the legal officer. Are any points of clarification the solicitor would like to make?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I do want to thank everybody who's come, especially all yourselves that come all the way from Ludlow. So we will now withdraw to deliberate and make a decision. The hearing will close and you can leave the meeting. All interested parties will be advised of the decision in writing within 5 working days of this hearing. The decision will be sent to you in the same way you communicated with the licensing team prior to the hearing, e.g. if you emailed your representation to the application, it will receive the decision by email. Any party who feels aggrieved by the decision of the committee has the right to appeal to the Magistrates' Court. This appeal must be made in writing to Stafford Magistrates' Court within 21 days of the notice being received. And that's it then. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Now finished. We staying in Graham or when we go?